My parents left town for Hawaii on my wedding day, leaving behind a gift that when I opened it, I couldn't believe what I was seeing inside. But let me back up and tell you how we got here, because this story isn't just about one terrible day. It's about a lifetime of being treated like I didn't matter. My name is Madison, and I've spent my entire life watching my parents choose everyone else over me. Growing up, it was always about my older sister Sarah. When Sarah made the honour roll, we went out to celebrate at the fancy steakhouse downtown. When I made the honour roll the following semester, my mum said that's nice. Honey, without even looking up from her magazine. When Sarah graduated high school, they threw her a massive party with all our relatives. When I graduated 2 years later, they said we couldn't afford it because they'd just paid for Sarah's first semester at an expensive private college. The pattern continued into adulthood. Sarah's engagement party, they flew in from 3 states away and stayed for a week. My engagement announcement, a quick congratulations text message, and then radio silence for 2 weeks. I kept telling myself it would be different when the big moments came. I kept believing that when it really mattered, they'd show up for me. I was so wrong. 6 months ago, when I called to tell them I'd set my wedding date for June 15th, there was this long pause on the phone. Then my mother's voice, cold as ice. "Oh, that's the same weekend we're supposed to leave for Hawaii. We've had this trip planned for 8 months. Madison, Mom, it's my wedding day." I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can't you reschedule the trip? We've already paid for everything. Non-refundable deposits. You know how expensive Hawaii is." She sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Besides, you could have asked us about the date before booking everything." But I had asked. I'd sent them 3 possible dates 2 months earlier and never heard back. When I followed up, my dad said they were too busy to think about it right now and to just pick whatever worked best for us. The next few months were a blur of wedding planning that felt increasingly hollow. Every milestone that should have been shared with family became a solo experience. Dress shopping. I went alone. Cake tasting. Just me and my fiancé David. Venue walkthrough. The wedding coordinator kept asking where my parents were, and I kept making excuses. David's family, the Goldsmiths, were the complete opposite. They embraced me from day one, asking detailed questions about every aspect of the wedding, offering to help with anything we needed. His mother, Patricia, even offered to throw me a bridal shower when she realised my own mother hadn't planned one. I politely declined, still holding on to hope that my parents would come through somehow. 3 weeks before the wedding, I made one last desperate attempt. I drove to their house on a Saturday morning, finding them in their kitchen, planning their Hawaii itinerary. "Please," I said, standing in their doorway like a stranger. "Please don't go to Hawaii on my wedding day. I'm begging you." My father didn't even look up from his travel brochures. "Madison, we've been through this. The money's already spent. I'll pay you back," I said, tears starting to fall. "Whatever it costs. I'll find a way to pay you back. It's not just about money." My mother said, finally meeting my eyes. Sarah's wedding was such a production. All that stress, all that drama. We need this vacation. Sarah's wedding. Always back to Sarah's wedding. The wedding they'd spent $30,000 on. The wedding they'd talked about for years afterward as the most beautiful day of our lives. "This is my wedding," I whispered. "Your daughter's wedding? You're being dramatic." My mother said, waving her hand dismissively, "It's just one day. You'll have plenty of photos to show us when we get back." I left without another word. The morning of June 15th dawned grey and drizzly, which felt perfect for my mood. I'd woken up at 5 a.m. in my childhood bedroom. I'd stayed at my parents' house the night before, some naive part of me still hoping they'd change their minds. But when I crept downstairs, I found their suitcases by the door and a note on the kitchen counter, "Gone to catch our flight. There's a gift for you on the dining room table. have a nice day. Mom and Dad, a nice day. My wedding day. And they wished me a nice day like I was heading off to work. I found the gift box on the dining room table, wrapped in plain brown paper, no card, no ribbon, just a medium-sized box that felt surprisingly heavy. For a moment, my heart lifted. Maybe this was their way of showing they cared. Maybe inside was something meaningful, something that would prove they'd been thinking about me after all. I tore off the paper and opened the cardboard box. The smell hit me first, that acrid, burned smell that gets into your nose and stays there. Then I saw it. The remains of fabric, charred and blackened. It took me a moment to recognize what I was looking at. And when I did, my knees buckled. It was my first wedding dress, the one I'd bought 2 years ago for a wedding that never happened when my previous relationship fell apart. I'd stored it in their attic, thinking maybe someday I could have it altered or donate it to someone who could use it. I'd forgotten it was even there. But they hadn't forgotten. Underneath the burned fabric was a piece of white paper, folded neatly. My hands were shaking as I opened it, but the message inside was written in my mother's careful script. Let's see how you get married now. I stared at those words for what felt like hours. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They hadn't just chosen to miss my wedding, they'd actively tried to sabotage it. They'd gone into their own attic, retrieved a dress that represented one of the most painful periods of my life, burned it, and left it for me to find on what should have been the happiest day of my life. I called David, sobbing so hard I could barely speak. Madison, what's wrong? Are you okay? They're gone. I managed to choke out. They left for Hawaii, and David, they burned my old wedding dress and left it for me with a note saying, let's see how I get married now. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. They did what? I can't do this, I said, sinking onto my parents' couch. I can't get married today. I can't smile and pretend everything's fine when my own parents when they hate me this much. Madison, listen to me, David said, and I could hear him moving around, probably getting dressed. I'm coming to get you right now. And then we're going to my parents' house. David, no, I don't want to ruin your family's day with my drama. Our family, he said firmly, they're our family now. And they're going to want to hear about this. An hour later, I was sitting in Patricia and Robert Goldsmith's living room, still in my pyjamas, with the burned dress and the note on their coffee table. Patricia had made me tea and toast, which sat untouched beside me. Robert was pacing by the window, and I'd never seen him so angry. 35 years I've been in business, he was saying, his voice tight with controlled rage. 35 years dealing with difficult people, and I have never seen such calculated cruelty. Patricia sat beside me, rubbing my back in small circles. Sweetheart, I am so sorry. I cannot imagine what would possess someone to do something like this. Maybe we should just postpone, I said quietly. I don't think I can walk down the aisle knowing they did this. Absolutely not, Patricia said, her voice firm but gentle. Madison, look at me. I lifted my eyes to meet hers. Those people, and I'm sorry, but I can't call them parents after this. Those people do not get to dictate how your story goes. They chose to exclude themselves from one of the most important days of your life. That's their loss, their shame, their burden to carry. Robert stopped pacing and turned to face me. Madison, I've been wanting to ask you something for weeks now, but I didn't want to overstep. Would you allow me to walk you down the aisle today? The kindness in his voice broke something open in my chest, and I started crying again, but these were different tears. For the first time in hours, they weren't tears of pain and betrayal. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of being seen and valued by people who had every reason to stay out of family drama but chose to step in anyway. You would do that, I whispered. It would be my honour, Robert said. Patricia and I, we think of you as our daughter already. We have from the moment David brought you home. Patricia squeezed my hand. And I hope you know that every important moment from now on will be there. Every anniversary, every birthday, every holiday you want to share with us will be there. I looked at these two people who had welcomed me with open arms from day one, who were offering to step into the space my own parents had abandoned, and I felt something shift inside me. For 26 years, I'd been begging for scraps of attention and affection from people who seemed determined to withhold both, but here were people offering freely what I'd been desperately seeking elsewhere. I don't have a dress, I said suddenly. The practical reality hitting me, Patricia smiled, and there was something almost mischievous in her expression. Actually, about that. I hope you'll forgive me for being presumptuous, but after your mother didn't plan a bridal shower, I took the liberty of having something made for you, just in case. She disappeared upstairs and returned with a garment bag. Inside was the most beautiful wedding dress I'd ever seen. Elegant ivory silk with delicate beadwork that caught the light like scattered diamonds. It was exactly my style, exactly my size, and probably cost more than my parents' entire Hawaii trip. Patricia, I breathed. I can't accept this. You're not accepting it, she said with a smile. You're borrowing it. It's a family dress now. I'm hoping maybe someday you'll pass it down to a daughter or daughter-in-law of your own. For the first time since opening that horrible box, I felt something like excitement building in my chest. These people, my new family, they weren't just offering to fill the gaps my parents had left. They were offering me something I'd never had before, unconditional love and support. Okay, I said, standing up and smoothing down my pajama pants. Let's get married. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Patricia called her stylist, who came to do my hair and makeup. Robert coordinated with the wedding venue to make sure everything was still on track. David handled the photographer and made sure all our friends knew the ceremony was still happening as planned. And slowly, as I sat in Patricia's bedroom getting ready, surrounded by women who were treating this day as if it were the most important thing in the world, I started to understand something crucial. Family isn't just about who shares your DNA. Family is about who shows up. Family is about who chooses to love you, especially when loving you is inconvenient or complicated. My parents had made their choice when they bought those plane tickets to Hawaii. They'd made it again when they burned that dress, and they'd made it a third time when they left that cruel note. But the Goldsmiths had made a different choice. They'd chosen me as Patricia fastened the buttons on the back of the dress, her hands steady and sure while mine shook with nervous energy. I caught sight of myself in her full-length mirror. The woman looking back at me was radiant, glowing with something I'd never seen in my own reflection before. The confidence that comes from being truly, unconditionally loved. You look absolutely stunning, Patricia said, adjusting the veil. David's going to lose his mind when he sees you. Thank you, I said, and the words felt inadequate for everything she'd done, everything they'd all done, for the dress, for this morning, for choosing me. She turned me around to face her, her eyes bright with tears. Oh, sweetheart, we didn't choose you. You were always ours. We just had to wait for you to find your way home. The ceremony was everything I dreamed of, and more. As Robert walked me down the aisle, his arms steady and proud, I felt like I was floating. The venue, an elegant garden pavilion that the Goldsmiths had somehow transformed into something magical in just a few hours, was filled with white roses and soft candlelight. Every guest was on their feet, and the look on David's face when he saw me, I'd never felt so beautiful, so loved, so absolutely certain that I was exactly where I belonged. What I didn't expect was how many people would be there. The Goldsmiths hadn't just invited a few extra family members. They'd brought what seemed like half of the city's social elite. As we exchanged vows, I noticed photographers in the background who weren't part of our original wedding party. Patricia later explained that several society magazines had requested to cover the wedding, and she thought it might be nice to have professional documentation of our special day. The Goldsmith family weddings are always noteworthy events, she'd whispered to me during the reception. People are interested in seeing how we celebrate. I was still learning about the extent of the Goldsmith family's prominence in the city. David had always been modest about his family's wealth and influence, but seeing it in action was overwhelming. The guest list read like a who's who of business leaders, politicians, and celebrities. The mayor was there, 2 congressmen, the CEO of the largest tech company in the state, even a minor Hollywood actress who apparently went to college with David's cousin. But what struck me most wasn't the glamour. It was how warmly everyone treated me. No one made me feel like an outsider or questioned who I was or where I came from. Patricia and Robert introduced me to everyone as our daughter Madison, and the pride in their voices was unmistakable. During the reception, Robert stood up to give a toast that brought tears to my eyes. Today, our family grows by one very special person, he said, raising his champagne glass. Madison, you brought light into our son's life from the moment he met you, and you've brought that same light to all of us. We're honoured to call you our daughter, and we promise you this, from now until the end of time. You have a family that will stand by you, support you, and love you unconditionally. Welcome home. The applause was thunderous. As I looked around the room at all these people, successful, influential, powerful people clapping for me, celebrating me, I felt a kind of validation I'd never experienced. This wasn't about money or status. This was about being seen as valuable, as worthy of investment and celebration. What I didn't realise was that this validation was about to go far beyond the walls of our reception venue. The professional photographers Patricia had hired weren't just from local magazines. One of them worked for Vanity Fair, another shot for Vogue. The third was a society photographer whose work regularly appeared in the New York Times style section. By Sunday morning, less than 24 hours after I'd walked down the aisle, photos of our wedding were everywhere. The headlines were everything I never could have imagined. Goldsmith heir marries in lavish garden ceremony. Society wedding of the season. David Goldsmith and Madison Porter inside the Goldsmith family's latest celebration. A wedding fit for royalty. Patricia showed me the articles over breakfast, her phone buzzing constantly with congratulatory messages from friends across the country. I hope you don't mind the attention, she said, looking slightly worried. I should have warned you that Goldsmith family events tend to attract media interest. Mind it, I was speechless. Growing up, I dreamed of my parents being proud enough of me to show me off to their friends. Instead, I'd spent my whole life feeling like they were embarrassed by me, like I was something to be hidden or explained away. And here I was, featured in magazines I'd only ever seen in doctors' offices and high-end salons. David found the whole thing amusing. Welcome to life as a Goldsmith, he said, kissing my cheek as he looked over my shoulder at his phone. My cousin's engagement made page 6 last year. Mum's charity gala got a 2-page spread in Town and Country. Your family is famous? I asked, still processing. Not famous like movie stars, Patricia explained. But the Goldsmith name carries weight in certain circles. business, philanthropy, society events. We've been in this city for 4 generations, and Robert's company employs about 12,000 people. When we sneeze, the local economy catches a cold. She said it matter-of-factly, without arrogance, but the implications were staggering. I'd married into one of the most influential families in the region, and I was only now beginning to understand what that meant. By Monday, the photos had spread beyond traditional media to social platforms. Someone had created a hashtag, Goldsmith Wedding. The pictures of me in Patricia's stunning dress, dancing with Robert, cutting the cake with David, sharing champignons with the family. They were everywhere. Friends I hadn't talked to in years were reaching out to congratulate me. Former colleagues were commenting on posts. Even people I barely knew from high school were sharing the articles. I decided to post some of my favourite photos to my own social media accounts, not to show off, but because I was genuinely happy and wanted to share that joy. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments, share after share. People were calling the wedding goals and absolutely magical. Several friends commented that they'd never seen me look so radiant. It felt good. After a lifetime of being made to feel invisible and unimportant, being celebrated so publicly was intoxicating. For the first time in my life, I felt like someone worth noticing. I should have realised that someone else would be noticing too. Tuesday afternoon. I was at work, trying to focus despite the constant stream of congratulations from co-workers, when my phone started ringing. The caller ID showed my mother's number. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. They were supposed to be in Hawaii until Friday. Why were they calling? I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Same number. Again, I let it go to voicemail. Then my father's number. Then my mother again, then Sarah's number, my sister, calling for the first time in 6 months. By the end of the day, I had 17 missed calls. When I finally listened to the voicemails that evening, sitting in the beautiful apartment that David and I shared, an apartment that I was learning was actually a penthouse in one of the city's most exclusive buildings. The messages told a story that was both predictable and pathetic. The first few were from my mother, her voice getting progressively more frantic. Madison, call me back immediately. I need to understand what's going on. Then, Madison, I've been getting calls all day from people asking about your wedding. Why didn't you tell us who you were marrying? And finally, call me back right now or I'm flying home early. My father's messages were shorter but more pointed. What the hell is going on? Madison, Helen Morrison called me asking why we weren't at our daughter's wedding to the Goldsmith boy. Since when do you know the Goldsmiths? But it was Sarah's message that really got to me. Madison, oh my God, I can't believe you didn't tell us David's family was loaded. Do you know how this looks? People are asking me why I wasn't your maid of honour. Call me back. We need to talk strategy about how to handle this. Strategy. Not congratulations, not happiness for my joy, not an apology for missing the most important day of my life. Strategy. I set the phone aside and tried to process what was happening. For 26 years, these people had treated me like an inconvenience, a disappointment, someone whose achievements weren't worth celebrating. But the moment they discovered I'd married into wealth and prominence, suddenly I was worth their attention. David found me sitting on our couch, staring at my phone with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Everything okay?" he asked, settling beside me. I handed him the phone so he could listen to the messages. I watched his expression change from confusion to disgust as he worked his way through each voicemail. "Unbelievable," he said when he finished. "They literally burned your dress and left you a note saying, 'Let's see how you get married.' And now they're upset because you got married too well. They want to talk strategy." I said, my voice flat, "Sarah wants to know how to handle this." "Handle what?" "The fact that they abandoned me, David was quiet for a moment, then asked gently, "What do you want to do?" It was such a simple question, but it hit me like a revelation. What did I want to do? For my entire life, I'd been reactive when it came to my family, taking their criticism, accepting their neglect, making excuses for their behaviour. But for the first time, I had the power. They wanted something from me now. They needed me. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to call them back and tell them exactly what I think of them. But part of me thinks I should just ignore them completely." "You don't owe them anything," David said firmly. "After what they did on our wedding day, you don't owe them a phone call, an explanation, or even acknowledgement." My phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. "I know you're getting these messages. We're flying home tomorrow. We need to talk." Then another from Sarah. "Mom and Dad are freaking out. They're cutting their trip short. You need to call them before they do something crazy." And finally, one from my father. "Your mother has been crying all day because people keep calling asking questions about the wedding we weren't at. Fix this. Fix this." As if their absence, their cruelty, their complete dismissal of the most important day of my life was somehow my fault. As if I was responsible for managing their embarrassment. That's when something crystallized for me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. I looked at David, this man who had stood by me, whose family had embraced me, who had given me a taste of what real love looked like. And I made a decision. "I'm going to call them back." I said, "Are you sure?" "Yeah." "Because I want to tell them something, and I want to say it clearly so there's no misunderstanding." I dialed my mother's number. She picked up on the first ring. "Madison? Finally. Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. I've been on my honeymoon." "Mom, the thing that happens after a wedding, the wedding you chose not to attend. Don't be dramatic. We had a vacation planned. You burned my wedding dress and left it for me to find with a note saying, 'Let's see how you get married.' Did you think I wouldn't get married? Did you think that would stop me?" There was silence on the other end. We were just upset. "No," I interrupted. "You were cruel. And now you're upset because you missed out on something you think would have benefited you. Well, here's what I want to tell you. You made your choice. You chose Hawaii over your daughter's wedding. You chose cruelty over love. And I'm choosing to move forward without you." "What do you mean without us?" "I mean, I'm done. I'm done begging for your attention, your approval, your presence at important moments in my life. I have a family now who shows up. I have people who celebrate my happiness instead of trying to sabotage it. Madison, you're being unreasonable. Am I? Tell me, Mom, what do you want from me right now? Do you want to apologize for missing my wedding? Do you want to congratulate me on finding love? Or do you want me to introduce you to my husband's wealthy family so you can benefit from the connection?" Another silence. I thought so. I continued. "You had 26 years to be my mother. You had every opportunity to show up, to support me, to treat me like I mattered. Instead, you made it clear that I was your lowest priority, so I'm making you mine. You can't just cut us out of your life." "I'm not cutting you out. You cut yourselves out when you chose not to be there for the most important day of my life. I'm just accepting your choice and making peace with it." "What about Sarah? What about family?" I thought about Sarah, who had called not to congratulate me or apologize for missing the wedding, but to talk strategy. Sarah, who had been the golden child our entire lives, who had received every opportunity and advantage that I'd been denied. Sarah made her choice too. I said, she could have been my maid of honor. She could have been there to support me. Instead, she was nowhere to be found until she realized there might be something in it for her. "Madison, please, I have to go. Mom, my husband and I are having dinner with his parents tonight. My real family, the people who chose to love me." I hung up before she could respond. The phone immediately started ringing again, but I turned it off. David reached over and took my hand. "How do you feel?" he asked. I considered the question. How did I feel? Sad. Certainly there was grief in letting go of the hope that my parents would ever be the people I needed them to be, but underneath the sadness was something else. Relief, freedom, the exhausting weight of constantly trying to earn love from people who were determined not to give it had been lifted from my shoulders. "I feel lighter," I said finally, "like I've been holding my breath for 26 years, and I can finally exhale." David squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, but it was necessary." I looked around our beautiful home, thought about the life we were building together, the family that had welcomed me so completely. I spent so many years thinking something was wrong with me because my own parents couldn't love me properly. But there's nothing wrong with me. There was something wrong with them. The next few days were a whirlwind of missed calls, angry text messages, and increasingly desperate attempts to reach me. My parents cut their Hawaii trip short and flew home 2 days early. Sarah started calling my friends, trying to get information about how to contact me. My mother even showed up at my old apartment, the one I'd lived in before David and I moved in together, and harassed my former neighbour for my new address. But I held firm every time I felt myself weakening, every time I thought maybe I should give them another chance. I remembered that burned dress. I remembered the note. I remembered 26 years of feeling like I didn't matter. More importantly, I remembered how it felt to be celebrated. The Goldsmiths didn't just accept me, they were proud of me. When Robert introduced me to his business associates, there was genuine warmth in his voice. When Patricia talked about our wedding to her friends, she beamed like she was talking about her own daughter's happiest day. This was what family was supposed to feel like. This was what love looked like when it was freely given instead of grudgingly rationed. 3 weeks after our wedding, David and I were featured on the cover of the city's premier lifestyle magazine. The headline read, "Love Finds a Way, the Goldsmith Wedding Story." Inside was a 6-page spread with beautiful photos from our ceremony and reception, along with an interview about our relationship and our plans for the future. One of my co-workers brought the magazine to the office, and suddenly I was surrounded by people wanting to see the photos, hear about the wedding, ask about married life. For the first time in my professional life, I felt like someone worth knowing. That evening, as David and I looked through the magazine together, he pointed to one particular photo that made me catch my breath. It was taken during Robert's toast, and it showed me surrounded by the Goldsmith family, Patricia, with her arm around my shoulders, Robert raising his glass, David's aunts and uncles and cousins, all focused on me with expressions of genuine affection and pride. "Look at your face in this picture," David said softly. I looked. My face was radiant, glowing with joy and confidence. I looked like someone who belonged, someone who was valued, someone who was loved. "I've never seen you look like that before," he continued. "Even in photos from before we were married, there's something different about you now." He was right. There was something different. I'd stopped waiting for permission to be happy. I'd stopped apologizing for taking up space. I'd stopped believing that love was something I had to earn through perfect behavior and constant sacrifice. My parents had given me a gift after all, though not the one they'd intended. By showing me their worst, by making their contempt so clear and undeniable, they'd forced me to stop making excuses for them. They'd pushed me to a breaking point that became a breakthrough. I was free from the exhausting cycle of hope and disappointment, free from the constant feeling that I wasn't good enough, free to be loved by people who chose to love me, not despite who I was, but because of who I was. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, showed 43 missed calls and dozens of text messages from my parents and Sarah. I deleted them all without reading most of them. Do you think you'll ever talk to them again? David asked. I considered the question seriously. Maybe someday, I said finally. If they ever actually apologize. If they ever show genuine remorse for what they did. But I'm not going to hold my breath. And I'm definitely not going to put my life on hold waiting for them to become different people. Good, he said, pulling me closer, because you have a whole life ahead of you with people who already love you exactly as you are. As I fell asleep that night, wrapped in the arms of my husband, in the home we'd built together, surrounded by the love of a family that had chosen me completely, I thought about that burned dress one more time. My parents had meant it as a weapon, a final cruel blow designed to destroy my happiness. Instead, it had set me free,